Life is an amazing thing. One day you can have everything, and the next you will be without anything and absolutely alone. It's worth taking only one wrong step. My wife had an affair, and it was quite long, but suddenly her lover disappeared somewhere and no one can find him. What's the matter? My daughter Annabelle has reached the age often called the terrible twos. If you are a parent or have been one, you understand how challenging yet wonderful this time can be. Annabelle had discovered how to talk and walk. You find yourself constantly chasing after a tottering little person who seems to move at lightning speed. This person has an impressive vocabulary, but prefers to use no above all other words. It was a Saturday evening, and I was giving Annabelle a bath with the help of Mr. Bubbles. It had been a long day. Weekends were predominantly Dad's time in our household. As the dad, I had gotten up early with Annabelle. "Swings," she said to start the day. The day included a visit to the park with its swings, the little merry-go-round, and various trips down the slides. By bath time, I was nearly exhausted. Kate, my wife of 5 years, had spent the day cleaning the house. It seemed a fair trade. Kate is an attorney at a big firm. She practices criminal law, makes a 6-figure income, and we have a cleaning service. But she is a meticulous person who likes everything just so and in its proper place. 2-year-olds are messy individuals. The division of labor in our house has definitely changed to reflect that fact. Kate was a mother with her infant constantly on her hip, but when the child began to pull away, the chasing was done by Dad. This evening, Kate was having a girls' night out. There had been quite a few of these lately. I attributed it to her need to reconnect with friends after being tied down with a baby. "I'm going out front to wait for the car service," Kate said, bending to kiss my cheek as I bathed Annabelle. Kate then leaned in to kiss our daughter. As she did, she pressed close to me, and I caught the scent of her perfume. It was a small thing. She had a dozen perfumes, and I never paid much attention, but this one was different. She had never worn this scent before. I knew because I instantly recognized it. My mother had died when I was 5, in a car accident on a cold winter night. As she'd kissed me goodbye that night, she had been wearing Chanel No. 5. It was a scent memory, a powerful and unmistakable recognition. I did not know Kate owned that perfume, and I knew she had never worn it before. I froze and at the same instant took a good look at her. She was in what I believe women refer to as a car coat. It's a light coat, rather like a trench coat. It came to her knees, but it opened above her waist, showing the black dress beneath. The coat hid what she was wearing, but not entirely. I thought I recognized the dress and certainly the 4-inch stiletto pumps she also wore. "Where are you going tonight?" I asked, keeping my voice very casual. "Mario's," she said. I knew Mario's had Ben Walker playing there. Ben was a bit of a local celebrity. He had concert piano ambitions, but played any gig he could get. I knew Ben. He would be playing sad love songs by the time the evening was over. The women who crowded Mario's loved Ben and his playing. A good friend never missed a night that Ben played at Mario's. Mario's was a mid-priced restaurant and bar with a little dance floor. Ben knew how to play a dreamy dance ballad, but he always ended with those slow love songs women like to dance to. I like them myself, with my lady in my arms. Mario's was the kind of place you would expect to find a group of women spending a night out. I trusted Kate. The explanation was reasonable. She was a handsome woman. More woman than you would expect an average-looking man like me to attract. But she was no movie star, and we had been happy together for 5 years. Opposites, maybe, in many ways, but we fit together. "I'll be home around 11 Kakara, salt you were." "Shuck," she said. I had my hands full with Annabelle and pushed any bad thoughts to the back of my mind. Half an hour later, Annabelle and I were sitting in front of the TV in the family room, watching Cinderella. I'm not sure how much of the story she understood, but she was completely captivated. We watched it repeatedly until she eventually fell sound asleep. I turned off the TV and just sat there, holding my sleeping princess in my arms. I know I'm a lucky man. I have more happiness than I deserve. Guys like me don't usually end up with a nice home, a beautiful wife, and a daughter like Annabelle. I was 17 when I joined the Army to be all you can be. However, I wasn't what the Army wanted. I had done well on their tests. I had a high school diploma and acceptable, if not outstanding, grades. But something just didn't fit. I had no discipline problems. Physically, I was well above average. Yet the Army had no place for me. After basic training, they kept placing me in one pointless position after another. I suppose I expected to be a soldier and carry a gun. Instead, the Army thought I should be a clerk. But I was hopeless in an office. I couldn't file anything to save my life. They tried me in the mess hall, but I couldn't cook. I lasted a day and a half. They sat me down and explained that I had no aptitude, that I wasn't really good for anything. So it was clear that I would make an excellent military policeman. They were right. I excelled in that job. It was indeed an impossible task to perform by the book. The Army correctly determined that I was one of the few capable of handling the position. You needed a complete lack of scruples coupled with very high moral standards. The focus was always on achieving the right result, regardless of the means. I received my first promotion in Iraq for killing a woman and her children. The car tried to crash through a roadblock. It was driven by a woman, and I saw there were children in the vehicle. The fact that a woman was driving was the final clue. I knew something was wrong the moment I first saw it. I watched her approach the checkpoint and waited. When the driver made her move, I made mine. 60 armor-piercing rounds did significant damage, but nowhere near what her 10 pounds of TATP could have caused. My career took off, but I doubt those in command approved of me. I know the general in command did not. He made it clear when he called me one day with a problem. "Listen, you motherless SOB. I know all about the crap you pull. But I have a problem here, so fix it," he said. He certainly had a problem. A young servicewoman was subjected to terrible actions by men. The 3 rapists were officers, all West Point graduates. The general had a significant scandal on his hands. People can lose their commands over such situations. Not actually the commander's fault, but that doesn't seem to matter. A good commander knows to use the resources at their disposal. After I treated 3 wounded West Point officers and made sure that the private was very satisfied, I reached the pinnacle of my Army career. I called the general to report back. "What do we call it?" he asked. We were arguing over which to choose, friendly fire or a random shot. "You don't know?" "Well, my employee is inclined to believe that an accidental shot occurred due to combat stress." "Is the woman happy?" he asked. "In exceptional cases," I replied. "So, how much do I owe you?" the general asked. "I need to." "What?" My man was fired with honors. "Are you kidding me? Do you want to honorably dismiss the man who shot 3 policemen?" "Combat stress." "I have a medical report," I said. I didn't mention that last week I helped this particular doctor with a DUI charge and that the man was dabbling in illegal substances. "Okay, send it. But are you sure about the girl?" he asked. "The young lady can finish her examination. She's getting help. The Army, as they say, is strong." This seemed to anger the general. "You can be useful, but you're still a jerk," he said. "I have never claimed otherwise, but feel free to call at any time. My door is always open," I said when he hung up. I spent 10 years working in security before deciding to retire. After that, I used my veterans' benefits to get a 2-year certification in public safety. I then got a job with the railroad as a security officer supervisor. One night, we caught some guys trying to steal plasma TVs from container cars in the rail yard. I was called to testify at their trial, and that's how I met Kate. She was an assistant district attorney at the time. 2 years later, we got married, and a few years after that, we became parents. After putting Annabelle to bed, I went to our bedroom. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house that we bought when we first got married. Money had been tight in those early years since Kate had a lot of student loans to pay off. I started looking for the perfume and found it right away on her dresser. There were a dozen perfume bottles, but this one was new. The closet in our master bedroom is large, but it's still almost too small for all of Kate's clothes. It was well organized, and I began searching through it. I knew exactly which black dress I was looking for. Kate never threw away anything that was still wearable. She hadn't worn this particular black dress since we were dating. It was very chic, expensive, and short. It was her come-hither black dress, which matched the heels she had on tonight. The dress wasn't in her closet. She hadn't been wearing her earrings in the bathroom earlier, but she always wore her diamond studs with that dress. When I checked her jewelry box, the studs were missing. My wife had claimed she was going out with her friends, but she was dressed to seduce. It took me less than 20 minutes to find her without leaving the house. I only have a basic cell phone provided by my employer, but she had an iPhone. Not wanting to pay for a replacement plan if her phone got lost, I had installed Find My iPhone on her device. I opened my laptop and quickly located her phone. She wasn't at Mario's, but at a different restaurant altogether. Vincenti's is extremely high-end and far beyond our budget. Perhaps my wife could afford it, but I certainly couldn't. A quick search on Street View and I had Vincentia's front door on my screen. It wasn't even 8 p.m., but I am a patient man. Just after 9 p.m., my wife emerged. I immediately recognized the man with her, Judge Leonard Simple, a recent appointee to the federal bench. I had met him several years earlier at a county Republican Party 4th of July picnic when he was still a DA. A good dozen years older than me, he had 15 years on Kate. But there she was, plain as day, kissing him as they left the restaurant. At our first meeting, I immediately took a disliking to Simple. He struck me as nothing more than a slimy politician. He might have been what women consider good-looking or even handsome, but his shifty eyes and overbearing demeanor made him unappealing to me. Additionally, there was an air about him that suggested to me, as another man, that he was both arrogant and weak. I was bothered by the way he had looked at my wife and told her so. Kate had just laughed it off. Kate didn't make it home by 11 p.m. Instead, it was 12:30 a.m. when I saw her getting out of his Mercedes from the window of the third bedroom. Our house is part of a small 1970s development built around a cul-de-sac, and they had parked so she could come in the back. I anticipated this. My wife is meticulous and cautious, expecting me to be asleep but preparing for any other scenario. What she didn't expect was that her oblivious husband was aware of her actions. I lay in bed pretending to be asleep as she entered our bedroom. She went straight to her jewelry box, starting with her diamond studs, then moved to her closet, the only renovation we had made to the house. She must have changed in there as she emerged in an old terry cloth bathrobe and headed down the hall to the bathroom. I heard the shower turn on. When I left the bedroom to check the bathroom door, I found it locked, a precaution my ever-cautious wife had taken. I wouldn't catch her washing away any evidence tonight, so I went back to bed. When she finally came in, she carefully lifted the covers and snuggled close, whispering softly, "I love you." There would be a reckoning, but it would not be tonight. Special Agent Thomas McPierce of the FBI was a seasoned professional, recently divorced from his wife of 18 years, and with 2 children. He was nearing retirement. His extensive experience had earned him a relatively quiet assignment, but also paired him with a junior partner, Sheila Marks. They presented their credentials to cross the police line. Sheila grinned, enjoying the respect their FBI credentials commanded. "Lose the grin, Agent. A man is dead, after all," McPierce said. Sheila adjusted her demeanor. Tall and athletically built, she wasn't particularly striking but was sharp and had a military background. She had excelled at Quantico and received high praise. McPierce believed she would be more effectively utilized with a SWAT team, given her physique and military posture, evident in her very short haircut. To figure out who was in charge, the agents approached a tall woman in her 40s. Connie Baker, a lieutenant of detectives, was supervising the coroner's team as they removed the body. Her team was scattered throughout the area. "I've been expecting you," she said as they approached. "How's it going, Connie?" Tom asked. Good, and you? Could be better. This is my new partner, Sheila Marks. Tom introduced, gesturing toward Sheila. Lieutenant Connie Baker. Nice to meet you, Sheila said. Likewise, Connie replied, then turned to McPierce. Sorry to hear about your divorce. It was a customary sentiment, though Connie had little sympathy and thought poorly of McPierce's ex-wife. Leaving a man like Tom was something Connie would never consider. So what's the situation? Tom asked. One dead federal judge, Connie replied. It appears to be a robbery, but... 2 hours later, the situation with the but was still unresolved. The murder of a sitting judge was no routine case, so Tom and Connie thoroughly examined the crime scene. Connie was also a competent and reliable investigator. The FBI had no reason to interfere with her investigation, so Tom decided to pursue a different angle. Judge Simple had previously served as a district attorney and was known for his stern law and order stance. The murder could be an act of vengeance or related to an ongoing case. Tom and Connie agreed to split their efforts. He and Sheila would explore leads unrelated to robbery, while the FBI labs would handle the evidence, and Connie and the local authorities would investigate the robbery angle. After 10 days, there was no significant breakthrough. The forensic evidence provided basic information. Leonard Simple had been shot from about 5 feet away, directly between the eyes. The bullet was from a Walther PK-038, a quiet, easily concealable and powerful weapon, typically used by professionals. However, a professional hit would likely have come from behind or the side. The judge was killed as he exited his front door around 8:00 p.m., and the porch lights would have made the killer visible to Simple. The shooter clearly wanted Simple to see him. He wanted the victim to know who was shooting, Tom thought. This pointed to a motive of revenge, but who and why? The obvious suspects didn't match the crime's profile. While there were some hardened criminals involved, their motives and alibis didn't align. Then, Tom's phone rang. It was Connie. We've recovered some stolen items through a fence, she said. They had a suspect in custody, a methamphetamine dealer named Alex Slomes. I won't say anything without my lawyer, Slomes began. That's fine, Connie responded. But this is Special Agent McPierce from the FBI, and he has a one-time offer for you. Slomes tensed at the mention of the FBI, but as Connie's words sank in, he relaxed. Can't hurt to listen, Slomes said. Tom McPierce then explained what they were looking for and what they were prepared to offer in return. So, do you have something to tell us? McPierce asked. Yeah, I don't have a name, but I can describe the guy who gave me the stuff. Several hours later, the DA and a legal aid attorney finalized the agreement, and Alex Slomes was working with a sketch artist. The resulting drawing had good detail but was ultimately useless. Both Connie and Tom recognized that immediately. Another hour of questioning Slomes confirmed their suspicions. This is something different, Tom said. You could say that, Connie replied, looking at the picture of an obvious long-term drug addict. It was exactly what you'd expect and therefore a clear false lead. Doesn't add up. The Walther 38 has a street value of what, $1,000? Tom said. More. The gun is worth more than the items taken from the victim. No addict would travel to the suburbs for this crime when they already have their fix, Connie explained. No, this was done by someone with a motive who wanted to mislead us and knew how to do it, Tom speculated. In the end, they decided to circulate the picture but to focus more closely on the victim and who might have wanted him dead. I think this was personal, Tom McPierce concluded. Kate was anxious. It wasn't just because the FBI had requested an interview. She had anticipated this sooner or later. Unless they apprehended the culprit quickly, it was likely the authorities would want to question her, given her role as Len Simple's mistress. Their affair had been ongoing and intensified following the birth of her daughter. Kate loved her husband, Bill. He was a wonderful man and an excellent father, but not particularly thrilling. He was reliable and steady, while Len was attractive, wealthy, and influential. However, Len wasn't the marrying type and was definitely not someone you'd want to spend your life with or raise children together. Len was also arrogant and self-centered. Kate could handle him for a few days at a time, but not continuously and certainly not as a life partner. Len was fine with this arrangement. All he wanted from a woman was intimacy and casual communication. Len wasn't a Casanova. He enjoyed women but preferred a regular girlfriend with whom he was comfortable. He and Kate had been involved in a passionate yet non-committal relationship. Len's death had a profound impact on Kate, making it hard to hide her sorrow from her husband. The funeral was harsh. Everyone kept expressing their condolences. Len's older sister Charlotte was his only remaining family. Officially, Charlotte was the chief mourner, but everyone who knew Len and Kate was aware of the affair between the prominent defense attorney and the judge. Kate had considered leaving her husband at home, but couldn't find a convincing reason to do so. Most people assumed Bill had at least tolerated her relationship with Len. Only her closest friends knew the truth. She had completely hidden her long-term romantic relationship with the powerful DA and then judge from her loving and supportive spouse, believing that her deception was a way to protect Bill. She was shielding him from the harsh reality that he could never compete with a powerful man like Leonard Simple, who took whatever he wanted. If it had been up to Len, poor Bill would have been in a difficult position, but Kate insisted on this very condition. Bill should not have known about any details. The funeral became a test for this secrecy, as people constantly expressed their condolences to her. Even someone as trusting as Bill could begin to suspect that there was more to their relationship with Len than just a professional connection. There was no intimacy between the couple for a week after the funeral, although Bill remained as gentle and loving as ever. Just 3 days ago, her husband dragged her into bed, and since then their meetings had become frequent. This was a rather unusual behavior for him. Kate hoped that even if Bill had suspicions, he chose to put what happened to Len in the past. Does it matter what he didn't know? The FBI interview was disturbing, and she felt an urgent need to monitor their investigation. It was extremely important to shield Bill from any investigations. She needed to keep him in the dark, or at least in his ability to deny everything. She wanted to provide him with the peace of mind he deserved as her devoted husband. Special Agent McPierce was impressed. The law offices of Stanford, Price, Clark, and Morgan were large, luxurious, and unmistakably costly. Their attempt to speak with Mrs. Ford had been unfruitful. "What about Catherine Morgan?" Sheila, Agent Marks, suggested. "Oh, Mrs. Morgan, I'll let her know you're here," the receptionist replied. Tom McPierce noticed that his less experienced partner had done her research and was already jumping to conclusions. The information they had suggested a long-term relationship between the prominent lawyer and the victim, but their visit was only for a preliminary interview. "Control your moral outrage and keep it off your face," Tom whispered to Sheila. "Sorry, but Mrs. Morgan, really? Her husband doesn't even get mentioned," she whispered back. Kate Morgan came out to greet them. She was a tall woman with shoulder-length black hair, dressed in a high-end charcoal gray pinstripe business suit, tailored to accentuate her slim but curvaceous figure. It would be fair to describe her as beautiful. She led them to a spacious, well-lit office furnished with elegance. After they were seated in comfortable chairs around a coffee table, Kate offered them refreshments, which they declined. "I assume you're here about Len's murder," Kate said. "Yes, we heard you were a close friend of Judge Simple," Tom responded. Kate's subtle smile brightened her face as she said, "Let's be honest. I was his mistress, and for quite some time, just over 8 years." Tom was taken aback by the woman's blatant honesty and her evident lack of embarrassment, though it certainly made things easier. "Thank you for being so candid," Tom said. "I'm eager to assist in any way I can, and honesty seems the least I can offer." "I hope you understand that I'd appreciate your discretion," she replied. "Of course. But wasn't your relationship a matter of public knowledge?" "I don't think so. In a long-term relationship, many colleagues and friends might become aware or suspect something. But actual knowledge? I doubt anyone could say for certain." "Even your husband?" Sheila asked with a hint of sarcasm. Kate's smile grew more pronounced, and she let her disdain for the unattractive agent show. My husband is a devoted family man but lacks sophistication. He wouldn't have understood my relationship with Len. I'm certain he was until quite recently, unaware that Len was anything more than a former colleague, Kate said, turning to McPierce and adding, I would like him to be kept out of this. He has no useful information and I wish to maintain his peace of mind. What might have happened recently to unsettle him? Tom inquired. Well, the funeral, I suspect. Many people offered their condolences, acknowledging how close Len and I were. My husband is trusting, but not naive. An unusual way to describe a man who advanced from the military police ranks to become the chief of security at a rail yard, safeguarding millions in equipment and merchandise, Sheila commented, seizing the opportunity. As Tom had feared, the inexperienced Sheila was jumping to conclusions without any evidence. He placed a calming hand on her forearm and spoke gently. Please excuse my colleague, Tom said, but her question is reasonable given the circumstances. Kate seemed to think for a moment. Well, my husband is indeed a very capable man with a responsible job. However, you misunderstand his character. He is a devoted family man, a loving father, and a caring husband. I deeply regret taking such advantage of his trust. But you must understand. My relationship with Len Simple predates my marriage. He was a powerful and persuasive individual, not easily relinquishing what he felt was rightfully his. Still, our relationship was no more than a sincere friendship. He started as my mentor, and to a great extent I owe my current success to his guidance, Kate explained. But you didn't tell your husband and you believe he was unaware? Tom inquired. Yes, I kept my relationship with Len a secret from my husband. Bill is the person I love, and we have an exceptional marriage. Knowing about Len and our past would have served no purpose and would have only hurt Bill unnecessarily. Since my relationship with Len was ongoing and would have continued as long as Len desired, telling Bill about it would have been pointless. I understand. Can you tell us where you were? On the night Len died, and likely at the exact time of his death, I was at Valentine's restaurant waiting for him. The staff there can confirm that for you. We were regulars. I'm sorry, Kate's eyes filled with tears as she recalled the memory. That's okay. We understand. These situations are never easy. But do you know where your husband was? Tom asked. Kate started wiping her eyes with her handkerchief. Yes, he was at work. He had the 4 to midnight shift, but he usually stays until after 2 a.m. The rail yard is busy at night. But please, if you look into this, be discreet. It wouldn't be fair to involve my husband. I understand, and I appreciate your honesty, Tom replied. As the agents began to leave, Kate suddenly remembered something. Do you know what happened to Len's watch? She asked. Tom turned back. Watch? Yes, it was a special gift I gave him about 2 weeks before he died. It was sort of an anniversary present as we had been together for 8 years. It was a rose gold Rolex and quite expensive. His sister didn't find it among his belongings after the funeral. I assumed he was wearing it that night. No, we had no information about that. The police recovered his ring and a gold cross, but I don't think they knew about the watch, Tom said. Len's sister mentioned it wasn't in his personal effects, and to my knowledge, he had started wearing it regularly, she added. Can you describe it for me? It's a Rolex rose gold, and it has the inscription, Love Catherine and Annabelle. Duh. I'll let the homicide detectives know that it might have been stolen, Tom said. Tom had agreed to meet Connie at Valentine's. He'd donned his finest suit, sensing that the 8 p.m. meeting was likely more than just business. I'm glad you could make it, Connie greeted him. She was seated at a strategically placed table. The restaurant was clearly designed for couples, which explained why Judge Simple had chosen it for his meetings with Kate Morgan, a.k.a. Mrs. William Ford. Connie was dressed for the occasion and then some. She wore a black dress with a plunging V neckline that showcased her generous cleavage. The dress was also shorter than what a woman nearing 40 might usually choose, but it wasn't overly revealing. Her hair and nails were impeccably done. She was undeniably attractive. Perhaps too attractive, Tom reminded himself, noting that she was at least a decade younger than him and a colleague. "Stop over-analyzing and take a seat," Connie said. Tom grinned. "You can read minds now?" "Men are so predictable in some ways, yet so clueless overall," she replied. "Sorry, it's just nothing. We're adults, single, and it's the best restaurant in town," she interrupted. "All right," he said as the waitress arrived. "This is Tara," Connie introduced her. "Tell Agent McPierce what you told me." The waitress Tara appeared somewhat anxious as she spoke. "Well, it was just that they were a peculiar pair. At first, you wouldn't have noticed anything unusual. He was a tall, handsome man who seemed affluent, so I wasn't surprised when people referred to him as Judge. She was elegant, very attractive, and much younger, the kind of woman you'd expect him to be with. But they didn't seem like a couple who had any real affection for each other. It almost seemed like she could have been a paid escort. But she clearly wasn't that type. In fact, she was likely a professional, probably a lawyer," Tara concluded, offering her take on Judge Simple and Mrs. Morgan. Tom inquired, "What do you mean by saying they weren't affectionate?" "Just everything about them. They never arrived together. She would always wait for him. It was never the other way around. She never initiated any physical contact, and when he touched her, it was in a possessive manner. When they left, he always had his arm around her as if he owned her, which seemed to make her uneasy. She wore a wedding ring with a small diamond engagement ring. He had a ring too, but it wasn't a wedding ring. She was definitely married, but not to him." Tom then asked, "Did you notice if he wore a watch?" Tara's face brightened as she recalled the detail. "Yes, after she gave it to him. Right here at this table, she handed him the box. It was the only time I saw them actually kiss. He was very pleased with her gift and its engraving." "Engraving?" Connie asked. "Yes, I remember because it was a bit unusual. It said something like, 'From Catherine and Annabelle, your loving ladies.' I remember wondering who Annabelle was, since I knew he called her Kate, or sometimes Kitten." Tom asked, "When did she give him the watch?" Tara thought for a moment before replying. "It must have been more than 3 weeks ago. I remember it was a Friday. She was dressed to the nines, but in a much more provocative way than usual. Her dress was so tight and short, it was almost scandalous. She came in covered by a coat, but once he arrived, she took it off. After dessert, she brought out the watch box, and they celebrated with a bottle of top-notch champagne. 2 weeks later, she waited for him again, but he didn't show up. It wasn't the first time she'd waited for him, but it was the first time she waited all night without him coming. The next day, I saw on the news that he had been killed. I felt a bit guilty about telling the busboy that the bastard stood her up." "Thank you," Connie said. Tara glanced down at them and replied, "Sure, anytime. Do you want to order something?" "Yes, we're staying for dinner," Tom said, giving Connie a look that clearly communicated that refusing was not an option. Kate was more shaken by the meeting with the FBI than she let on. The female agent had looked at her with such disdain, as if she were insignificant. Although Kate carried a heavy burden of guilt and shame, she still considered herself a good person caught in tough circumstances. When she was a young attorney just out of law school, she caught the eye of the powerful and charismatic district attorney, Leonard Simple. Women rarely turned down men like Len. Kate found herself in a subordinate position, with Len being the top authority and a highly esteemed attorney, while she was at the very beginning of her career. His attention flattered her, and she was attracted to his strong presence. Though she wasn't naive or promiscuous, she tried to avoid becoming involved with him. However, once Len showed interest, she felt she had little choice. but to acquiesce. Kate hadn't expected their relationship to endure, but for 3 years, they maintained a steady, albeit discreet, affair. While it was never public knowledge, most people in the office were aware. She was given important assignments and treated well, yet her relationship with Len kept her confined. 2 years into her affair with Simple, Bill Ford entered the scene. He provided the steady companionship she needed. He was a part-time cover and part-time partner. The infrequent nights she spent alone despite her ongoing relationship with Len made it necessary to have an occasional official date. Both she and Len appeared to have other romantic interests. Their relationship was private and never intended to be permanent. Len was not interested in commitment, and Kate had no intention of becoming his wife. Being his mistress suited her. She needed more from a husband than Len could offer. "We've had an accident," she had said as they lay together in bed between their intimate moments. "What are you talking about?" Len asked. "I'm pregnant," she replied. Len didn't say anything. His silence conveyed that it was her issue to deal with, not his. "I'm going to marry Bill. We haven't been intimate yet, but we will. He won't realize the baby isn't his." "Is that your plan?" he asked. "Yes, I won't terminate the pregnancy. I'm Catholic. A sinner, yes, but not a murderer." Len shrugged and took her intimately. They never discussed it again. Bill was easily influenced. She seduced him and made sure that the protection did not work. Afterward, she simply showed him the pregnancy test. He was eager to marry quickly, as he had no family. Her parents were disappointed by the lack of a grand wedding. Kate had been married for 3 months when the most dreadful day of her life began. While at work, she felt dampness between her legs. An hour later at the hospital, the doctor spoke of spontaneous something or other. All Kate knew was that her baby was gone. Bill was incredible. He comforted her, expressing his deep love, and organized a funeral for the child who would never be. He was strong for her and insisted they would have a large family. Somehow his faith gave her strength. It was the hardest time of her life, and it was then that she fell in love with her wonderful husband. Kate's relationship with Len dwindled but never completely ended. It seemed that her involvement with Len had no bearing on her marriage to Bill. She came to realize that she loved Bill in ways she could never love Len, and for the right reasons. Bill was a good and devoted husband, while Len, despite his wealth and influence, was a despicable person. Len had secured her a position at the top criminal defense firm in the state. There, she thrived, and 2 years later, Annabelle was born. Annabelle was Bill's daughter in every way but possibly one. Kate chose not to verify paternity, feeling it unnecessary and disloyal to Bill. To her, Bill would always be the father of her children, regardless of any tests. Len had a different perspective. Although he had only seen Annabelle in photographs, he was convinced she was his child. He pushed for their relationship to become more public and insisted that Bill be informed. Kate refused to comply. Her sweet husband must never know. He was the one who cared for their child and was the best father Annabelle could have. The idea that Bill could be so casually accused by Agent Marks was deeply distressing to Kate. She knew that if her lover were to be killed, suspicion would naturally fall on her husband. However, no one who knew Bill could believe he was capable of such a crime. Kate's responsibility now was to protect Bill at all costs. She was determined to shield him from the harsh truth. Why should he, the innocent, suffer because of her transgressions? Kate picked up the phone, hoping that her call would safeguard her secret. Special Agent Tom McPeace spent 4 nights last week with Lieutenant Connie Baker. They discussed their case several times, but mostly they had intimate conversations. It was amazing. Tom realized that after the divorce he had been wandering aimlessly through life. What he needed was a new relationship, and Connie was perfect for this role, uninhibited and demanding nothing. He knew that Connie hoped their romance would lead to something, and he felt the same way. "I'm just a little more careful," he reflected, "but once I get burned, I become doubly shy." Tom's first marriage broke up when his wife, with whom he had lived for 18 years, left him for a younger man. One day when he came home, he found her sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of red wine and a serious expression on her face. For her, "We need to talk." There followed a brief explanation of her unhappiness and a package of divorce papers. 18 years later, she demanded all their possessions, half of his pension, and most of his salary for child support. They had a son and a daughter, both still in high school. Tom, who was usually well in control of himself, lost his composure at that moment. The divorce was controversial. To the surprise of his ex-wife, their children chose to stay with their father rather than with a new boyfriend. As a result, Tom began to receive child support, and his ex-wife's share of the property was less than 30%. He was lucky when his case was referred to a very sensitive female judge. Arriving at the office on Tuesday, he was preoccupied with thoughts of Connie, but had to address matters with Agent Marks. For once, Sheila had followed instructions. In investigating Bill Ford's alibi, she had been notably discreet. Tom had been advised to wrap things up quickly and keep the judge's missteps under wraps. The higher-ups would prefer a death that appeared to be the result of a mugging. Clearly, some favors had been pulled. Nobody wanted a scandal, except for Sheila. "My intuition tells me this guy is guilty, sir," she said. "Not sir. It's Tom, Mac, or Agent McPierce, but not sir. You're not in the military anymore, Agent Marks," he responded, a bit more curtly than he meant to. "Sorry, Mac. It's just that he fits the profile so well. Former military police who rose from a private to a captain. He had an excellent shooting record. He's definitely capable and has the strongest motive." And it wouldn't hurt that a scandal would tarnish Catherine Ford Morgan, Tom thought. Sheila had taken an instant dislike to Morgan, and Tom couldn't entirely disagree. McPierce should have been more critical of Kate Morgan, but he had learned long ago to separate personal feelings from his work. He also understood the position Morgan was in. A powerful man had entered her life. Sure, she made some poor choices, but let those without fault cast the first stone. He also recognized that Sheila, who was not very feminine and whom office gossip speculated might be a transsexual, carried a chip on her shoulder. It didn't help that she was physically more than a match for half the out-of-shape male agents in the office. She also outperformed all the female agents in both physical prowess and dedication to duty. Tom had overheard her a few times speaking in low tones on her personal cell phone, indicating a possible romantic interest outside work. He guessed she might have left the army to be with this person, who was probably another woman, though Marks kept that detail to herself. "Look, I don't want to be too blunt, but we need more than just a strong motive and your intuition. You need to either find evidence against Mr. Ford or clear him," Tom said. 3 days later, Sheila was beaming as she set a large file box down on her desk. "What's that?" Tom inquired. "Security tapes from the rail yard. They overwrite every 7 days," she explained. "Sorry, I don't quite get it," Tom said. "Since they're using this outdated system, the old footage isn't erased. The previous images are still beneath the new ones. And the lab techs believe they can retrieve the footage from the night we're interested in." Tom grinned and peered into the box. "Good job, Agent. But how many tapes do you have?" 27 cartridges, each with 12 hours of time-lapsed compressed footage," Sheila replied. "Well, good luck to you and the lab techs. Meanwhile, I have a date," he chuckled. In reality, he was meeting Connie again. Their relationship was becoming serious, and he was both thrilled and anxious. He arrived at Connie's place with the local newspaper and the idea of choosing a movie to watch together. Connie answered the door dressed in heels, stockings, and nothing else. "I thought we might catch a film," he said, hesitating. "Sorry, babe, but I need my man right now," she said, pulling him towards the bedroom. Connie took Mac to her bedroom and began to take off his outerwear. When he tried to assist, she swatted his hands away. "This is my job," she declared. They lay down on the bed and had a great time. Later, they lay together completely exhausted. Well, what did it all mean? He asked. Connie hesitated before answering. He waited patiently like an experienced investigator. I like intimacy, and I'm not going to hide it. I like the closeness we share, but I need something more, she explained. So it was to show me a different side of you, he said. That's right. And also so that you know that although I am very attractive, I am faithful to one man. I'm not messing with anyone else, she said, turning to meet his gaze. I guess it's time for me to clarify my intentions, he said. That's right, she replied. He still wasn't sure, but he knew he wasn't ready to let her go. He pulled her to him and kissed her. I want everything you have to offer, and if that means we have an exclusive relationship, just tell me what I need to do. First, we need to prepare your instrument, she said in a playful tone. She laughed sweetly, and he couldn't help but join her. Mac discovered Sheila Marks looking worn out in the office. You don't look like you had a great weekend, he remarked. Yeah, try watching 27 security tapes and then see how you look, she retorted. Mac chuckled. No sympathy here. You brought this on yourself. Sheila just grumbled in response. Well, he prompted. Well, what? He's visible in the tapes. Given the inept crew he oversees, if he weren't there, nothing would get done. If those railroad guards moved any slower, they'd be moving in reverse. Mac stifled a smile. So I take it the husband didn't do it. Sheila grunted. Could have hired someone. Which contradicts the idea that the judge knew his attacker. That's why we were focusing on the husband in the first place. So it's a botched robbery. I find that hard to believe, she said. Mac remained silent. They only had one lead from the jewelry sale. It didn't feel right, but you had to follow the evidence. Agent Marks leapt from the car in front of the El Dorado Hotel, a rundown establishment in the less affluent part of town. Agent McPherson followed at a more leisurely pace, as there was no pressing urgency. Connie was stationed by the hotel elevator while Sheila raced up the stairs. Seriously, Mac, what's with your partner? Connie inquired. Oh, the usual, I suppose, he replied with a shrug. Sheila had appeared quite disheartened after reviewing the rail yard footage. It seemed as if returning the tapes to the railroad was a personal defeat for her. Do you think she might be gay? Possibly, but if she is, she keeps it separate from work. Honestly, I have no idea. I've never seen her show interest in anyone, man or woman. That seems a bit unusual, don't you think? People are all different, and yet she seems to have little patience for someone like Mrs. Ford, he noted. Don't overlook the possibility of jealousy. When you're as attractive as Sheila Marks, it's tough to empathize with a beauty like Kate Ford. Watching women like Mrs. Ford juggle relationships can be hard on any woman, Connie commented. And yet a certain one-man woman I know seems to have a soft spot for that womanizing lady. I have my reasons. First, I'm older, and second, I'm a career woman who understands how easy it is to get entangled in a bad work situation. Sounds like you're speaking from experience. Definitely. Most women, regardless of their appearance, have faced unwanted advances from men in positions of power. In Morgan's case, she was targeted by a very influential man during a vulnerable period in her career. Once he had her, she probably felt trapped. As they continued their conversation while climbing the stairs, they avoided the unpleasant smell and potential hazards of the elevator. I feel for Sheila. She seems like a solitary person, Connie remarked. Well, she doesn't have many friends. I've heard she has a few army acquaintances and allegedly listens to music with someone, but she doesn't talk about them. She's very private, Mac replied. The room they eventually entered reeked of death. The coroner was busy bagging the corpse while Sheila watched with her usual impassive expression. The forensics team was doing their job, but the item Connie was calling about was lying on a small table, which was obviously used for both eating and cooking illegal substances. There were 2 evidence bags, one containing a Walther 38 pistol, and the other holding a gold Rolex watch. Mac picked up the bag with the watch and barely managed to make out the inscription inside. "Love, Kate and Annabelle, your ladies." "Any idea on the cause of death?" Mac asked Connie. "Yes, it looks like it happened from natural causes. The victim is Private Salvatore Marsh, an Afghan veteran who returned with a severe form of dependence on banned substances. He caught IT somewhere along the way and has been in and out of the hospital for the past few months. He was supposed to be in a hospice, but he checked out. It looks like he was self-medicating. We suspect that the cause of his death was either illness or illegal substances," Connie explained. "Are you going to close the case?" Mac asked. "Doesn't seem to make sense not to. The evidence fits. We don't know why he targeted the judge, but he had both the gun and the stolen items. With him dead, if there was anyone else involved, we'll never find out." "So the bitchy gets away with it," Sheila said, having silently approached them. "Keep it down," Mac said, turning to Sheila Marks. "I think there's been enough suffering here," Connie remarked. "It's time for people to move on." Sheila merely shrugged. Mac sensed that she seemed unusually downcast today. Whatever burdens she carried seemed heavier than usual. Mario's was quite busy for a Tuesday night, but it was ladies' night. Ben Walker had begun playing romantic ballads, and the mellow tunes had most patrons on the dance floor. The tall woman with the short, dark hair in the far corner of the bar was an exception. If you got close enough, you could see the tears welling up in her eyes. "I hope those tears aren't for me, Sheila," I said as I settled next to her at the bar. She turned away and replied, "No." I didn't press the issue, but stayed by her side as a good friend would. "I'm not crying, just thinking about Sal. I thought he'd gotten clean," she said. "He did, just not soon enough," I replied. "Well, I suppose you're safe now," she said. "Did the tapes work?" "Perfectly. No one even glanced our way. Some people can outsmart the system." "Oh, the system will prevail eventually, but not today." The bartender delivered the drinks I'd ordered, and I handed Sheila hers. "Come on," I said. "Let's drink to Salvatore Marsh, who left 3 officers injured and 1 judge dead. Not bad for a man whose hands shook too much to handle a gun." She managed a faint smile, clinked my glass, and took a sip of her vodka martini. "To a good comrade," she said. And then, as if it were an afterthought, she added, "You won't harm her." I didn't need to ask who she meant. She's Annabelle's mother. Besides, she's making a fortune. I think I'm somewhat entitled. That last remark finally brought out a genuine smile. "When you're not around, I miss you," she said, turning to me and wiping away tears. "If things had been different, I might even have fallen in love with you." "Wait, so you're not falling in love?" I asked, pulling her towards me. "You know exactly what I mean," she replied with a shy laugh. "Seriously, as I mentioned earlier, love is not just about physical actions. That's all we do for each other," I said, clinking my glass against hers and taking a sip of my first martini of the evening. We drank until Ben lost his temper. Then I drove her home and put her to bed. The bed she hadn't shared with any man since the terrible events. In many ways, she was the strongest woman I've ever known. She fired a full clip from an M4 carbine into the legs of the men who hurt her, as a result of which all 3 remained in wheelchairs for the rest of their lives. "So, that they never do that again," she said. But if you knew her well, you would see that underneath it all, she was still a resentful little girl. She was my little girl, my friend and comrade. We've always been together. There was no intimacy, but I had my own personal means for this. I ordered 2 fresh drinks, and when they arrived, I raised my glass and said, "For us," and then added, "Army-style tight." "Army-style tight," she repeated. "Would you like to dance?" I asked. When she nodded, I led her to the dance floor.